Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a classic, ancient political thriller straight from the source material. We're going to map out the fascinatingly complex, shifting power dynamics and character arcs during the explosive rise of David. It's a story of profound loyalty, extreme paranoia, and ultimately survival.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the core question we really have to answer right up front is this. What actually happens when a universally beloved national hero suddenly becomes the reigning king's absolute worst nightmare? The tension between a rapidly rising figure and an increasingly paranoid monarch is incredibly intense, and the historical text we're looking at today lays out exactly how this dangerous dynamic unfolds, step by step.
Section 1. A Covenant of Souls.
Before the conflict with the king explodes, we actually have to look at David's first major alliance. And surprisingly, it's with the king's own son, Prince Jonathan. According to the text, as soon as David finishes speaking with Saul, they make a formal covenant. To seal this pact, Jonathan gives David an extraordinary set of items: his royal robe, his garments, his sword, his bow, and his girdle. And this brilliantly illustrates a massive symbolic power shift. By literally stripping off his royal armor, the prince is symbolically yielding his own royal status. It's a completely selfless act.
The text specifically states that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and that Jonathan loved him as his own soul. So this wasn't just some convenient political treaty, right? Their very souls were deeply intertwined. This establishes a profound baseline of loyalty that stands in razor-sharp contrast to how the rest of the royal family will soon react to David's growing fame.
Section 2. The Spark of Envy.
But, of course, this peaceful alliance doesn't last. The inciting incident happens as David is returning victoriously from the slaughter of the Philistines. The women from all the cities of Israel come out singing and dancing to meet King Saul. But the lyrics of their joyful song, well, that's what causes a massive problem. They sing, "Saul had slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s." This inadvertently plants a deeply deadly seed of envy right in the king's mind.
Now, what's really interesting about this is when you look at the exact source of Saul's anger, the staggering difference in the math becomes totally obvious. When these numbers are put right in front of him, it deeply wounds his pride. Saul is furious. He complains that they've ascribed to David 10,000s, but to him only thousands. He immediately concludes the only thing left for David to take is the kingdom itself. And from that exact day forward, Saul eyed David with intense suspicion.
This creates a stark, fascinating thematic contrast within the royal house itself. On one side, you have the prince, Jonathan, who loves David as his own soul and freely gives up his royal robe. On the exact opposite side, you have the king, Saul, who eyes David with toxic envy and is absolutely consumed by the fear of his rise. One reacts with selfless giving, the other with paranoid plotter. Section 3. Javelins and Paranoia.
Now, this paranoia doesn't just stay in Saul's head. It rapidly spills over into the physical world. If we trace the king's increasingly desperate actions, the escalation is shockingly fast. Day 1, he eyes David with envy. On the morrow, an evil spirit comes upon Saul while David is playing music. Saul, holding a javelin, literally thinks, "I will smite David even to the wall." He throws it twice, and David barely escapes. When blunt force fails, Saul gets strategic. He essentially demotes David from the court, making him a captain over 1,000 soldiers, intentionally placing him in constant, deadly combat, basically hoping the enemy will do the dirty work for him.
Yet incredibly, this tactic backfires completely. The source material explicitly points out that despite the direct physical attacks and the dangerous political maneuvering, David behaved wisely in all his ways. Because the Lord was with him, he didn't just survive, he thrived. By going out and leading the people in battle, all Israel and Judah came to deeply love David. Saul's attempts to destroy him literally only made him a bigger star.
Section 4. A Lethal Royal Trap.
With brute force failing, Saul resorts to his darkest phase of paranoia yet, weaponizing his own family. It all comes down to this pivotal question: how do you eliminate a massively popular national hero without angering the very people who love him? Saul realizes he can't be seen doing it himself. He explicitly says, "Let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him." This marks a major shift from public murder to calculated political assassination.
Let's walk through the calculated steps of this covert plot. First, Saul learns his daughter Michal loves David, and he plans to offer her hand in marriage explicitly as a snare, or a trap.
Second, because David is hesitant, stating he's just a poor, lightly esteemed man unfit to be the king's son-in-law, Saul uses his servants to secretly persuade him. They whisper in his ear about how much the king and the court delight in him. Third, and absolutely most crucially, knowing David has no money for a royal dowry, Saul demands a lethal battle trophy instead of cash. The demanded dowry is frankly gruesome, and 100 foreskins of the Philistines. The king frames this to David as merely taking vengeance on the king's enemies. But we really have to clarify what's actually happening here. This bizarre demand functioned not as a traditional gift, but as a guaranteed suicide mission. The text tells us point blank, Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. He's intentionally manipulating David's poor economic status to push him into an almost certainly deadly combat situation. So the crucial point is, the plan fails spectacularly. David doesn't die. Instead, David and his men eagerly go out and slay the Philistines, and they don't just meet the quota, they double it. That's right, David returns with 200 foreskins, delivering them in full to the king so he might become his son-in-law. Not only does David survive the suicide mission, but he massively over-delivers, completely cornering Saul into giving him Michal as his wife.
Section 5. The enemy continually. Let's move on and see how this builds, because the plot backfired in the absolute worst possible way for the king, establishing a stark new status quo. On one side, David's public standing is absolute. He's loved by his new wife Michal and all of Israel and Judah. He behaves more wisely than all of Saul's servants. On the other side, Saul's status is completely inverted. He's displeased, wroth, and paralyzed by fear, realizing that the Lord is with David. The text tells us Saul became David's enemy continually. The permanent dynamic is set, right? A universally loved hero and a terrified king consumed by paranoia.
Which leaves us with this final thought. If every success, every victory, and every wise decision only serves to breed an increasingly powerful and paranoid enemy in the reigning monarch, how does the rising star possibly survive the long-term wrath of the fallen king? It's a brutal reality of ancient political survival, and a question that keeps you completely hooked on studying the rest of this epic history. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope it gave you a clear, structured view of the text, and I encourage you to keep questioning what you read.